Welcome to the debut episode of The Monsters of Castlevania, a new series that I've had in my mind for some time now, and mentally I started fleshing it out after Castlevania Nocturne Season 2. The season dives heavily into Egyptian mythology, and it made me want to take a deep dive into how varied the monsters inside Dracula's castle are in the games. The series isn't simply about vampires. There's a lot more to it than that. There's monsters from all sorts of cultures and all sorts of myths. With these videos, my aim is to make these smaller size videos that tackle specific ones, including where they came from, their role in the Castlevania universe, some of their major appearances. The first one I'll be covering is the ghostly Headless Dullahan. Before I begin, I'd like to give a big shout out to all my Patreon members. Your continued support keeps these videos coming, and if you'd like to have your name up here too, get sneak peeks, progress updates, and early access to videos, go to patreon.com/GamerThumbTV or click the link in the description to get started. The Dullahan is an interesting Castlevania foe, since it has served as both a standard enemy and a boss fight more than once. It often appears as a heavily armored enemy, sometimes with a completely missing head, sometimes with a head nearby, and it's represented both with and without a horse. Why is the Dullahan represented in such ways, and where did the inspiration for the monster originate? Sure enough, the Dullahan wasn't a creation of Konami. It's pulled from real-life myths. The legend of the Dullahan is often credited to the supernatural, ghostly apparition stories of Irish folklore, although there is some debate whether it actually came from Ireland or traveled from somewhere else. Either way, it is a terrifying legend that is easily designed to keep scared children up at night. The details as far as the Dullahan's appearance differ from story to story, but in many versions its appearance originates near a graveyard where the body of a wealthy, wicked noble is buried. The spirit manifests as a horseman, missing a head and riding a black horse. The head was said to have large eyes that moved rapidly back and forth, while a frightening smile spread from cheek to cheek. Thomas Crofton Croker's 1834 story, Fairy Legends and Traditions of South Ireland, portrays an account of the Dullahan and describes the head in gruesome detail. It reads, "Such a head no mortal ever saw before. It looked like a large cream cheese hung around with black puddings. No speck of color enlivened the ashy paleness of the depressed features. The skin lay stretched over the unearthly surface almost like the parchment head of a drum. Two fiery eyes of prodigious circumference, with a strange and irregular motion, flashed like meteors." In some accounts, the Dullahan wouldn't be riding a horse of its own, instead opting to ride a horse-drawn carriage. A death coach comprised of human remains, the wheel axle made of human spine, and the spokes of thigh bones. And lanterns adorned the carriage, made, of course, of hollowed-out human skulls. As the Dullahan made its way through the dark forest of Ireland, it would whip the horse for increased speed with a whip made from a human spine. Any witnesses to a Dullahan's appearance would have their eyes whipped out, a punishment since the horseman couldn't see without a head attached. The head would be used as a lantern to light its way, and it also scanned the countryside for mortals whose deaths were approaching. As it approached villages, the Dullahan would search from house to house and splash blood on those who opened it as it called out the name of its target. Once it arrived at the doorstep of a mortal whose time had come, it would claim their soul and ride away with it. The only way to ward off a Dullahan would be to present it with a gold object, as it was said to be the only thing it feared. The tales of the Dullahan eventually did inspire the famous Headless Horseman from the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And of course, Castlevania couldn't resist adding the monster to Dracula's collection of minions. The Dullahan's first appearance in the series is Castlevania III Dracula's Curse, where it's known as the Headless Hunter. It can be found by Trevor and the gang wandering around areas like the Haunted Ship of Fools. It's a skeleton-like enemy wearing torn robes, wielding a sword and carrying its head. And it did share this appearance throughout multiple games in the series, returning in Super Castlevania IV, except with much better graphics. Again, it appears as the Headless Hunter in the Castle Keep. In Rondo of Blood and Dracula X, Dullahan appears for the first time as a real threat in the torture chamber in the river, elevating its status from standard enemy to a boss fight. And it's much larger than its Headless Hunter counterparts. Instead of tattered robes, it wore knight armor, was equipped with a great lance in one hand, and its head in the other hand. Even the severed head is a threat this time. Castlevania Symphony of the Night reuses the same Headless Hunter sprite for the monster inside the long library and downgrades it back to a common foe. However, the English version of the game does refer to it as a Duran. The Japanese version calls it Dullahan Skeleton. But there is another enemy in Symphony of the Night inspired by Dullahan, which also appears in various other Castlevania games, the Dead Warrior, bloodthirsty undead knight whose spirits still lust for battle and seek to fight for all eternity. This enemy type also adopts the undead horse that the Dullahan legends make reference to. Aria of Sorrow further evolved this enemy by mixing in Japanese ideas with the dead samurai warriors armed with a naginata. The first game that used the classic Headless Horseman design was Circle of the Moon, this time actually carrying the Dullahan name. They wander around in the observation tower. Entering the 3D era of Castlevania gave us another Dullahan upgrade in Lament of Innocence's Pagoda of the Misty Moon. It's described as a headless armored knight that wanders in search of its lost head. They're not bosses, but they're still very dangerous since they're armed with a huge sword and a shield that releases fire breath. One of the most memorable Dullahan appearances is in Castlevania Curse of Darkness, where it appears as a powerful boss. That's destruction is required to gain access to the mysterious Infinite Corridor. It's described as a ghostly knight who searches for his lost head, and has a collection of unsuitable heads in his room. In Curse of Darkness, it's a dark-based enemy that has a weakness to light-based weapons. Portrait of Ruin includes Dullahan as the first boss in the game, found in the City of Haze. Similar in appearance to Rondo of Blood, but much larger. Then appears in Grimoire of Souls, even larger, after being abnormally powered up. Unfortunately, the mobile gaming market is butchering the design in the upcoming Moonlight Rhapsody game, which is going to be for the Chinese mobile market. The Dullahan will be known as the Head-Holding Swordsman, and it's just an armored figure holding a masked head due to China's cultural norms about bodies being shown in video games. But even the arcades weren't safe from the terror of the Dullahan, as it served as one of the bosses in the epic Castlevania arcade game. And that is my deep dive into one of Castlevania's many enemies. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know what other monsters you'd like me to cover. This video was a fun little experiment doing something different, so your feedback is appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one.